4th, 2026, Euro 3:17 a.m., Persian Gulf. The sea is flat, almost unnaturally calm. A U.S. Navy destroyer drifts silently at reduced signature speed, its radar emissions deliberately minimized. 80 kilometers to the north, the Strait of Hormuz narrows into a constrained corridor just 21 miles wide. And somewhere inside that corridor, invisible in the darkness, lies the problem. Iran has not closed the strait with ships. It has closed it with mathematics. Dozens of coastal missile batteries, mobile launchers, and sea mines are layered into overlapping zones of denial. Each zone is calibrated: range, speed, detection probability, forming a system designed not to win a battle, but to make one impossible. From a distance, the solution appears simple. The U.S. Navy has overwhelming firepower: carrier strike groups, cruise missiles, air superiority. So why hasn't the Navy simply broken the blockade? Because entering the Strait of Hormuz is not a question of strength. It is a question of exposure. And exposure in modern warfare is measured in seconds. So the real question is this: if the U.S. Navy can dominate any fleet on Earth, why does it hesitate at a 21-mile-wide corridor? The geometry of the Strait of Hormuz is deceptively simple. At its narrowest point, it spans roughly 39 kilometers. But usable shipping lanes shrink that space even further into tightly controlled corridors. This compression creates a predictable path, and predictability is the most dangerous variable in warfare. A U.S. carrier strike group cannot maneuver freely in such confined waters. A Nimitz-class carrier requires miles of turning radius and operational spacing. Its escorts, destroyers, and cruisers must maintain formation to provide layered defense. This means the entire formation becomes a moving equation with fixed constraints. Now consider the opposing system: Iran's coastal anti-ship missiles, such as the Noor and College Fars, operate at ranges between 120 to 300 kilometers. Traveling at subsonic to supersonic speeds, approximately Mach 0.8 to Mach 3, they can cover engagement distances in minutes. At Mach 2, a missile travels roughly 680 meters per second. At a distance of 150 kilometers, that gives a reaction window of just under 4 minutes. But detection does not occur at launch. Radar horizon limits detection range based on curvature of the Earth. A ship's radar, positioned roughly 20 meters above sea level, cannot see targets below the horizon beyond approximately 25 to 30 kilometers. This compresses reaction time dramatically. Instead of 4 minutes, the effective response window may shrink to under 90 seconds. Now layer in swarm tactics. Iran does not rely on a single missile. It uses saturation, multiple launch points firing simultaneously from different vectors. Each missile forces the defense system to allocate tracking, targeting, and interception resources, and those resources are finite. Even advanced systems like Aegis can be overwhelmed if the number of incoming threats exceeds interception capacity per unit time. So the problem is not whether the Navy can shoot down missiles, it is whether it can shoot down all of them within seconds. At the same time, the strait itself introduces another constraint: mine warfare. Naval mines are not relics of the past. They are low-cost, high-impact weapons that create persistent denial zones. Clearing mines is not a quick operation. It requires specialized vessels, slow movement, and precise scanning, sometimes taking days or weeks. And while clearing operations are underway, those ships become stationary targets. So now, the equation expands. Missiles from the shore, mines below the surface, restricted maneuvering space, compressed reaction time, and above all, predictability. This is why the situation appears impossible, because every solution introduces vulnerability somewhere else, and that is exactly how the system was designed. But the U.S. Navy does not approach problems as isolated threats. It approaches them as systems, and the first system it deploys is not visible on the surface. It begins far beyond the horizon. Before a single ship enters contested waters, the Navy constructs a layered detection network, an invisible architecture of sensors, platforms, and data fusion nodes. At its outermost edge are space-based assets. Satellites monitor infrared signatures, tracking missile launches and movement patterns along the coastline. Even mobile launchers leave thermal and logistical fingerprints. These signals are not always precise, but they provide probability, and probability is enough to begin shaping the battlefield. Closer to the region, high-altitude surveillance aircraft, such as the P-8 Poseidon, scan vast ocean areas using radar optimized for surface detection. These aircraft operate at altitudes exceeding 30,000 feet, extending their radar horizon dramatically compared to ships at sea level. From this vantage point, they can detect small vessels, abnormal movement patterns, and even changes in maritime traffic flow. Because in a blockade, movement itself becomes data. At lower altitudes, unmanned aerial systems fill the gaps. Drones loiter for extended durations, observing coastal activity, tracking vehicle movement, and identifying launch preparation behavior. A missile launcher is not just a weapon. It is part of a logistical chain, fueling, positioning, communication. And every step in that chain creates detectable patterns. The Navy does not need to see every launcher in real time. It needs to understand the system well enough to predict where threats will emerge. This transforms the problem. Instead of reacting to missiles after launch, the Navy begins shaping the environment before engagement. But this system has limitations. Sensors generate data. Data creates awareness. But awareness does not equal control. Because the moment the Navy moves closer to the strait, it enters the engagement envelope, and that is where the system begins to fracture. The moment U.S. forces compress toward the Strait of Hormuz, the balance shifts, distance collapses, and with it, the margin for error disappears. Iran's strategy is not to win a direct naval battle. It is to create a denial zone so dense with overlapping threats that entry itself becomes a liability. This is where escalation begins. Mobile missile launchers relocate constantly along the coastline. Unlike fixed installations, they operate on unpredictable timelines, using terrain masking, tunnels, and civilian infrastructure for concealment. This mobility introduces uncertainty into the detection system. A launcher identified 6 hours ago may no longer exist at that location. Now multiply that uncertainty across dozens of units. Even with satellite coverage and aerial surveillance, the system cannot guarantee continuous tracking, and in modern warfare, uncertainty is as dangerous as the threat itself. At sea, the risk compounds. Fast attack craft, small, agile vessels, operate in swarms. Individually, they are not significant threats. But collectively, they force naval defenses to divide attention. Each vessel must be classified, civilian or military, decoy or armed. Misclassification has consequences. Delay in engagement increases risk. Premature engagement creates escalation. So, the Navy is forced into a narrow decision window where hesitation and action both carry costs. Below the surface, the mine threat expands further. Modern naval mines are not just passive explosives. Some are influence mines, triggered by acoustic, magnetic, or pressure signatures. A large vessel like an aircraft carrier produces a distinct acoustic footprint. It cannot hide its presence. This means the ocean itself becomes a sensor, and every movement through mined waters becomes a calculated risk. To neutralize this, the Navy deploys mine countermeasure systems, unmanned underwater vehicles, sonar-equipped ships, and helicopters with detection gear. But these systems require time, and time is precisely what the environment does not allow. Because while mines are being cleared, the missile threat remains active. This creates a strategic paradox. To make the water safe, you must slow down. but slowing down increases exposure to missiles. To reduce missile risk, you must stay mobile, but mobility prevents effective mine clearance. 2. Opposing requirements. Both essential, neither compatible. This is where most conventional strategies fail, because they attempt to solve one problem at a time. But in Hormuz, all problems exist simultaneously. The solution lies in integration, not in overwhelming force, but in synchronized systems operating across domains. This is the kill chain. It does not begin with weapons. It begins with detection. Sensors across multiple layers, space, air, surface, subsurface, feed data into a unified network. Each sensor has limitations, but combined, they create redundancy. A satellite detects heat signatures. A drone confirms movement. A patrol aircraft tracks trajectory patterns. Individually, these are fragments. Together, they form a coherent picture. This data is transmitted through secure links, high-bandwidth, low-latency communication systems designed to maintain connectivity even under electronic warfare conditions. Because without data flow, the system collapses. At the center of this network are decision nodes. These are not just command centers. They are computational hubs. Algorithms process incoming data, filtering noise, prioritizing threats, and assigning resources. Speed is critical. Human decision-making alone is too slow for a 90-second engagement window. So automation plays a role, not to replace humans, but to compress the decision cycle. Detect, classify, assign, engage. Each step must occur within seconds. From here, the system extends outward to weapon platforms. Destroyers equipped with Aegis combat systems act as defensive nodes. They track incoming threats and launch interceptors, standard missiles, designed to neutralize targets mid-flight, but interception is only one layer. Electronic warfare systems attempt to disrupt guidance systems, creating errors in missile trajectories. Decoys are deployed to mislead incoming threats. Every incoming missile is forced to navigate a layered defense environment, and each layer reduces the probability of impact. But probability never reaches zero, which is why the final element of the kill chain is preemption, striking launch systems before they fire. This is the most complex part of the equation, because it requires precise targeting of mobile, concealed assets, often within civilian environments, and this is where the system encounters its final constraint. Not physics, not engineering, but decision. If you appreciate the engineering behind modern military power, type proud in the comments. Preemption is not simply a technical challenge. It is a strategic threshold. To neutralize Iran's blockade system, the U.S. Navy must target the network that enables it: launchers, command nodes, communication links, and logistical support chains. But these elements are distributed, and many are embedded within civilian infrastructure. This creates a layered problem. From an engineering perspective, the solution exists. Precision-guided munitions can strike targets. With meter-level accuracy, stealth aircraft can penetrate defended airspace. Cruise missiles can approach from low altitudes, avoiding radar detection. The system is capable, but capability is not the same as execution, because each strike is not just a physical action, it is a signal. And signals create escalation. Full-scale preemptive strike would not just degrade Iran's capabilities, it would trigger a broader conflict, and that introduces a new variable into the equation: strategic cost. The U.S. Navy operates not only within physical constraints, but within political and economic frameworks. The Strait of Hormuz carries roughly 20% of the world's oil supply. Any disruption affects global markets. Energy prices surge. Supply chains destabilize. So the objective is not simply to reopen the strait. It is to do so without triggering systemic shock. This is why the Navy has not broken the blockade, because breaking it is not a single action. It is a sequence of controlled operations, each designed to reduce risk incrementally. Instead of direct entry, the Navy applies pressure from distance. Long-range surveillance continues. Allied forces coordinate presence. Economic and diplomatic measures shape the environment. Meanwhile, the military system remains ready, positioned, prepared, but restrained. This is not hesitation. It is calibration. Because in modern warfare, timing is as critical as capability. Act too early and you escalate unnecessarily. Act too late and you lose initiative. So the system waits, not passively, but actively modeling outcomes. Every movement, every signal, every detection feeds into a larger calculation. When the conditions align, when risk, opportunity, and consequence reach an optimal balance, the system will act. And when it does, it will not be a single strike. It will be a coordinated sequence across domains: air, sea, space, cyber, each layer reinforcing the other, minimizing exposure, maximizing effect. This is how modern naval power operates, not through brute force,